that when I tell stories, you'll still be able to tell that I'm a Hoosier from Indiana, because my accent kind of flows. I'm a member of the Marshall Area Storytellers
Whoop.
and a long distance member of the Northwest Indiana Storytellers. So today I want to share with you, as a traditional storyteller, a story that several years ago was named one of the top 10 stories told at the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesboro, Tennessee. It's a story called Come Again in the Spring by Richard Kennedy. Now, Old Hark stood out to the side of his cabin. He reached into the bag tied to his waist and pulled out a little feed and scattered it around for the little birds chirping at his feet. And every once in a while, he sniffed the air. Smelled like snow was coming. Now, out the path through the forest that led up to Old Hark's cabin came a solitary figure all wrapped in a great bear coat, carrying a ledger under his arm. He walked right up to Old Hark, and he looked him in the eye, and he said, "Good day, sir." Well, Old Hark looked at him and said, "Well," he said, "now, your face is easy, but I can't remember your name. We met." And the gentleman looked at him and said, "Well, I have been around these parts before. Maybe you've seen me. I'm Death." Well, Old Hark stood up a little bit straighter, grabbed some feed out of that bag and started to scatter it. Looked that man right in the eye and he said, "Well, y'all come to the wrong place." "Oh, so have I," said Beth. He said, "Hold the ledger out underneath his arm, opened it up, scanned down the page. You are Old Hark, aren't you?" "Maybe him, maybe not." "Well, surely you're Old Hark. It's all right here in the book." "I don't know nothing about your book, and I'm not afraid." He says, "Now, you just come back again in the spring." He said, "You see all these little birds out here? They ain't normal winter birds. Why, I've been feeding these little birds ever since I was no bigger than a skipper. Now, they should fly south, but they don't. They count on me. Now, you come back again in the spring. I won't argue with you. I'll go right along. Why, by that time, these little birds are no better, and they'll fly on south." "Well, I'm afraid that just won't do. I can't come again in the spring," said Dad. He says, "The ledger, it's all scheduled." He said it would take up to 2 weeks I'd take to change everything and reschedule and change names and times of death and places of death and means of departure. He said, "No, that's absurd. I simply can't do that. You need to come along with me now." Old Hark said, "I ain't going. You come again in the spring." And he turned around and he walked away from Death. But Death followed him. Death could see that this old man was very resolute. Could see that he didn't have the attitude, the mood they needed right now to fill the business at hand. And so he opened up his book and he turned and he went down to Old Hark's page. And he thought, "I could just have a tree fall right on that old man right now. That'll take care of business." And he looked back, and next to Old Hark's name, where it said means of departure, it said, "Quietly, gently, peacefully." So violence was out of the question. He flipped through a few pages in that ledger, and he said, "I'll tell you what, Old Hark. I'll give you one more day. Now, I'll have to stay up all night rescheduling, changing addresses, times of death, means of departure, but I'll do it for you as a special favor." Old Hark looked at me and said, "Now, I ain't going. Now, you come back again in the spring." Oh, Death was growing quite impatient. He looked at Old Hark and he said, "You know, Old Hark, it's way past the time when I normally come for people your age." He says, "If I have to come back in the spring, you won't remember any of this. And we'll have to go through this whole thing all over again. And old Hart said, ain't nothing wrong with my memory. Oh, is that so? Said Death. Well, then maybe, just to prove that your memory is just fine, maybe we should have a little wager. I'll tell you what. I'll ask you a question, something that happened in your life, and when I come back tomorrow, if you can't answer the question, then all I have to do is make a check mark next to your name. But if you can answer that question, I'll come back again in the spring. Agreed? Agreed, said old Hart. Ask away. And Death thought, and he said, here's the question. On your second birthday, your mother made you a very special treat. What was that treat? And he tucked his ledger under his arm, wrapped himself up in that bearskin coat, and went off down the forest path. Well, old Hart threw some more feed out for his birds, and it was starting to snow again. So he went on into the cabin. Now, just as he was going in the cabin, the snow started coming down just pretty darn hard. And he went in and he sat down. And he sat in his rocking chair. And he thought and thought and thought. And he remembered ever so many things. He remembered Christmases and gifts and presents and company coming and what they had for dinner. But for the life of him, he couldn't remember what he had had as a treat on his second birthday. Well, he got up to check on the snow when he opened the door. And he saw little birds out there chirping around on the stoop. And he threw some feed out to them. And they just chirped all the more. He went to close that door. And as he went to close that door, he heard the strangest and the loudest chirp. He was just absolutely sure that the birds were chirping plum cakes. Well, the next morning, old Hart got up. And he did his normal chores and he fed his little birds. And he grabbed a shovel and the ladder from the shed and propped it up and climbed up the steps, the ladder, onto the roof to shovel off some snow. And along comes Death, walking up that path, holding onto his ledger. And he looks up at old Hart and says, "Good day," trying to keep a really happy face. But he had been up all night changing that book around, making arrangements for old Hart. Old Hart looks down at him. And he put his hand up the side of his nose and blew his nose in the snow. Looked Death right in the eye and he said, "Plum cakes." "Oh," said Death. He was quite surprised. But he held it together. He said, "That's amazing. There's not one person in 1,000 that could remember that far back. I bet you were just lucky. I bet you couldn't do it again." "Oh, really?" said old Hart. "I think I could." "Well, then let's do it again. Let me ask you, let me give you one more chance," said Death. "Let me ask you one question. And if you can answer that question, I won't come again until spring. Otherwise, here's the question. On your first birthday, your mother placed a bouquet of flowers in your crib. What were those flowers?" And off Death went down the path. Well, little Hart went around and chipped a little ice off the cistern and shoveled away a drift along the side of the fence, and the little birds are chirping all around him. And he's getting a little bit of feed. It's getting a little bit chilly. Finishes clearing off that roof. And when he climbs down, those birds are just a chirping, and they gave the loudest, most peculiar chirp as he went into the cabin. He was just sure that they said buttercups. So the next morning, old Hart gets up, goes out to do those chores again. And he goes in to split some wood. He grabs his maul, and he's got his maul ready. When up walks Death and says, "Well, good day, old Hart." Oh, Death was not pleased. He should have taken Hart 2 days ago. And old Hart looks at him, and he lifts that maul up. He looks Death right in the eye, and he says, "Buttercups." Well, right there and then, Death thought, I should just make that maul come right down and split that old man's head. But no, means a departure. Quietly, gently. So he pulled it all together and he said, well, that was outstanding. Outstanding for an old man like you. He said, shall we give it one more try? Well, sure. Said, I'll tell you what, just one more. And if I get that answer right, you don't come again until the spring. I won't give you no trouble. Just need to get my little bird satisfied. Agreed, said Death. Here's the question. On the day that you were born, when your father held you up and looked at you for the very first time, what were the first words out of his mouth? And off Death went. Well, old Hark finished up all his chores, and he was feeling kind of tired and chilly. And he listened for his birds, went about doing his normal things, but he was kind of tired. So he went on in the cabin a little bit early that day. Didn't hear a thing from his birds yet, but every once in a while, he'd open the door and listen and throw out some feed, but still no answer to his question. Didn't even put any coffee on the perkin or cut any bread. Didn't even have his cheese for his supper time. Went to bed kind of early that night. Slept endlessly all night. Slept a little late into the morning. But he got up and he went out to do his chores, and he kept listening for those little birds to let him know what was going on. What was the answer to that question? What did his father say when he was held up for the very first time for his father to see? It's hard getting those chores done. It took him twice as long. He was feeling so cold and so chilled to the bone, and he just was so tired. He finished up his chores and went on in the cabin. Instead of putting his coffee on the curtain, he went straight to bed. He pulled those covers over his head, tried to sleep, but kept watching those little birds on the windowsill. Too tired to open it up and listen to him sing to see if he had an answer to his question. Just hadn't felt this tired in such a long, long time. And he slept off and on. Wake up and see the little birds, but he couldn't hear them. Now I'll tell you why old Hark didn't get an answer to this third question. Now, in this very cabin, in this very bed where he was born, old Hark had fed those birds since he was a little bitty little snake lad. And those birds, generation after generation, knew old Hark really well and passed down everything about it. But I tell you what, on the day he was born, when that midwife held him up to his father, the window was closed and the curtains were pulled. So the birds didn't have the answer to his question. The late afternoon, Death comes knocking on the door. Hello? Old Hark? Come on in. And Death walks through the door. And the minute he sees old Hark laying in that bed, a smile crosses his face. Yes, he said, this is it. Success. I've taken old Hark home. He said, well, old Hark, it's so good to see you. He said, I was up all night making arrangements for you. I have chosen the best time ever, sunset. Sun going down, darkness coming up. It's the most beautiful time to leave with me. We usually save it for the poets. He says, okay, and he opened up his ledger, and he got his pen out, and he took the cap off, and he was just ready to make that check mark, and he says, I suppose we have to make it legal, Hark. Well, Hark wasn't paying any attention to him at all. He was watching his birds out on the windowsill, wishing he could hear those birds chirping and singing. so he said, I guess I just need to ask you the question. On the day you were born, when the midwife held you up for your father to see for the very first time, what were your father's first words? Mark wasn't paying attention to the question. He's watching his little birds, and he pointed to the window, and he said, open the window. What? Said that? And old Hark said, oh, open the window and let the birds sing. Well, Death threw his ledger out the window. He grabbed himself by the collar of his bearskin coat, and he tossed himself out the window, and off he went down the path. And old Hark sat up in bed. He was feeling a mite better. Well, he put some coffee on the gherkin, and he cut himself some bread and some cheese. And he thought about it. What was all that commotion all about? And then he figured it out. On that very day that he was born, in this cabin, in that same bed he had just left, when the midwife held him up for his father to see for the very first time, his father's first words were, open the window, let the birds